Welcome to the Recycle Podcast, where we discuss everyday issues from a mental health perspective. We are your hosts,
Dr. LaFonya Jones,
Dr. Rashonda Strickland,
and Dr. Nichelle Wall. Now, don't get it twisted. We're not going to be your stereotypical therapist.
What we will be is down to earth, informative, a little spicy, and vulnerable.
All right, interns, turn up the volume, grab your pen and paper. It's supervision time. As a reminder, this podcast is not meant to take the place of a relationship with a licensed mental health professional.
Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to Session 3, Trope, Trippin, Part 2.
As promised, guys, this week we're discussing the trope tripping that you all have to experience as Black men. And ladies, we cut ours off because we could have gone weeks and weeks and weeks.
As a note to all of our Black men out there, this is not going to be a man bashing session where we just talk about all of the, negative things that men do.
This is by no means us trying to say that we know what you go through and experience by any means. This is just us providing information through research and just through conversations that we've had with different men of all ages.
So something that we found in reference to, Black male life was a quote by Booker T. Washington that says, "The prime condition of slavery was to keep closed every avenue to knowledge. The Negro had no estate, no family. His sole inheritance was his body."
So just kind of to elaborate on that quote, we all know as African American people that it was a struggle for us to get a piece of grass of our own. And to see through movies, to see through just kind of the relationships of older men, that during that time, slavery time, they weren't able to, it wasn't that they were not capable, they were not able to take care of their family or protect their family as they wanted to. And if they did, they were killed. It's unfortunate that slavery was rationalized, is that they had to keep us in slavery. Otherwise, we will become criminal savage.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I was thinking about is how to kind of piggyback off that criminal savage idea is, the way Black men were viewed at that time in order to kind of and I don't know if the word I'm looking for is to create them so that they were no longer seen as human.
Yeah.
And the idea that they were strong and had all of these muscles and were able to do this work from sun up to sundown without a break, which is where the term work yourself to death actually comes from. Just standing up on, the auction houses and being viewed and poked and prodded and squeezed and all of these different things to be otherized and dehumanized. That's the word I was looking for earlier.
Yeah.
I think that kind of goes along with that. Yeah. I have to dehumanize you in my mind in order to be able to rationalize that what I'm doing is actually okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I was trying to get, more information about this episode, because obviously I'm a Black woman, not a Black man. Yeah. I want to make sure that I poll and pull information from them.
Exactly.
A guy that I know that I've known most of my life, his name is Brandon Johnson. He stated, Black men have to be politically correct all the time. We always have to be on edge from what is portrayed by people that have a negative vision of Black men. So we don't only have to fight masculine discrimination, but we have to fight a crooked mindset. In the history of Black masculinity, Black men had to tread lightly because it meant life or death.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's so unfortunate.
I do think that that's one of the that's a key factor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that kind of goes along with what I was saying about, you cannot just be a human.
Yeah.
You have to be some other worldly thing or just a thing in general so that you can survive.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the mindset, and this is something that I think a lot of people will understand, is that when we have like the battered women syndrome, it's like, okay, I always have to like, I'm on this fine line of, okay, I need to do everything to try to get into a good position, but then I can't do this because then this is going to be a problem. It's like you're in a constant state of anxiety and friction. That's just not a way that you can't stay in that state of mind for a long time without it having some horrible effects, which we see today after generations and generations of that.
Yes.
Yeah. So one thing I talk with my clients about that when we're dealing with children and some of the issues that they have with their kids is association. And, I talk with them that your kids are associating behaviors with certain responses. So you have stimulus, response, and through association is how they develop how to be in the world.
Yeah.
So when we, during slavery times, we associated certain behaviors with certain things and then acted accordingly.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talking back is associated. Okay. So I know I don't want to get whipped, so let me not do that.
Right.
Or, okay, if I don't do, I don't want to speak to numbers and things like that, but if you're picking cotton or doing cucumbers or tobacco or something, if I don't do a certain number of bales, then that equals this.
Yeah.
Or if I say no, that equals this, and just associating over time and then teaching those associations to your children.
Yeah.
The thing is, my heart breaks for Black men. Not that Black women don't have it difficult, but Black men, it's almost like they have always and feel like they always have been under the thumb of people of other cultures. It's almost like their anxiety can't leave. They're always competing. It's so much.
It's just no safe place for them.
Yeah.
It's a difficult place to navigate. And often what ends up happening is that they put that pressure on themselves.
Yeah.
And then it creates this narrative of I have to be a certain type of way, and then there's no growth. And we see that a lot nowadays. Back in the day, they were trying to grow because they were trying to get from under slavery, obviously. Nowadays, it's like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be a Black man. This is how it's supposed to be to do this. And it's a mindset of only having one way to do something, and it's actually now a hindrance.
Yeah. One of the first novels that was written about Black men, it demonized him and put him in the category of being a Black man who forced himself on white women.
Yeah.
And that's the picture. So now back then, well, even now, I guess at times,
but it's like, we're not too far
away.
away.
Ain't went nowhere.
Exactly. But back then they were definitely, anytime they saw a Black man, they clutched their pearls. And so, if that's how you're viewed by people, how can you truly have a clear identity of who you are other than seeing yourself as a demon, as a perpetrator? It
becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
You say I'm this, so I'm going to do this, and I'm going to fulfill, I'm going to step into those shoes and fully become that person. Of course, everybody's not following that path, but that is one way that Black men end up showing up in the world, because it's like, damned if I do, damned if I don't.
Yeah. And I was thinking, you have this weird dichotomy when it comes to Black men. So they are fetishized by just about everybody. And then, but simultaneously demonized by everybody.
Yeah. How can it be both?
Yeah.
Right.
Like when we were doing this research, I kept thinking to myself, so are Black people lazy or are we hard workers? Like, which one is it?
Right.
We can't be both.
Right.
Are we really good at what we do, or we're no good at anything? It's weird. It's weird that no one is, well, I'm not going to say that no one's picking it up, because people are picking it up, but it's just like whatever I say goes, and that's what we're going to go with.
And that's the thing. we know we're hard workers as a culture, but they come in and put their little stamp on it and snatches it from us, and then make it like it's just what it's supposed to be. Like, you're lazy. This culture is lazy. That's it. When we know we'll work 4 and 5 jobs if we have to make the ends meet.
But I think it goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, is I have to be able to rationalize in my mind the treatment that you are receiving. So I have to say you're lazy, even though I will work you from sun up to sundown.
Yeah.
So in my mind, that makes sense because you're lazy. You know, it's this weird.
They have to assuage the guilt.
Yeah. It's a definite cognitive dissonance. You know, for those out there,
phrase.
Yeah, for those out there that don't know what cognitive dissonance is, it's essentially you have two competing ideas or kind of internal thought processes that don't quite match up. So like Dr. Wall was saying, you know, are you lazy or are you a hard worker? And those two ideas can't really coexist in the same space.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter how much evidence you have, you're going to stick to that.
Mm-hmm.
They created this demonized title for Black men as being men who force themselves on white women. But according to statistics, most of the forcing was from them, white men.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you summoned a Black woman to come and sleep with you, it doesn't mean it wasn't rape. She was forced to.
Well, what other option did she have to be like beat, killed, kids taken away, them beat, husband beat, killed? You know what I mean? Like, you have to go do what you got to do in order to make it the next day.
Mm-hmm. So statistically, Black men were not the ones forcing themselves on women. I'm going to just say women, not just white women, but women, period.
Yeah.
Statistically.
Well, they didn't have any power. I think people kind of forget that. Not that innately they didn't have any power, but in slavery, you have the oppressor and you have the oppressed. Mm-hmm. The oppressor was the owner of the slaves. Yeah. The oppressed was the slaves. So the slaves weren't the ones running the plantation. They were the work. They were the field hands and the house help and different things like that. We weren't, you know, out there living our best lives. We were living our worst lives.
Right.
We tried to have moments of bliss.
I truly believe that the lynching part obviously was something they wanted to do. But I also believe and read that it was a way to keep Black people in line.
Yeah.
It was a way to keep them from voting. Keep
Fear
them
tactics.
from applying
they work.
Right. They do.
Work well.
Right.
To this day.
You took the words right out of my mouth because it's working. Just thinking about this whole mask thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's working. Fear-mongering is a real... Fear-mongering and propaganda work phenomenally. Yeah. I mean, if there's one thing that actually does what it's supposed to do, it's those two things.
Mm-hmm.
We are... Well, we've always been. I'm not going to say just now, but it is amazing to see that no one likes to research and use their brain. It's just like, oh, because this person is in this position, then they must be right. No, people be wrong. Even if their intent is not to be wrong, maybe they really thought that whatever they were saying was factual. You need to fact check some things that come over the airwaves, through the news channels, from your mama, from your daddy, like experiences, because everybody's experience is not the same. So what may have been your experience or what may have been right for you is not exactly what I've experienced, and that doesn't make either one of them wrong. It makes it our individual experiences.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say even with the experience, you know, if you have an experience that's different from what you're seeing and hearing through social media, believe your own experience. You don't just because they say that on the social medias or whatever, that doesn't mean that it's true, because you know it's not true. Your evidence is different.
Yeah.
So if you know that you haven't had a uncomfortable experience with a Black woman or Black man, then why are you still believing that that Black men are demonized?
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah. I think we're all on the same page.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess we can go ahead and get into some of the tropes,
Okay.
and then that way we can start breaking them down, because there are like one or two more than we have for the Black women. So again, I'm going to go historically, how they were set up.
Yeah.
So the first one is the Mandingo or the Buck. The second one is the Sambo. The third one is the Jim Crow. The fourth is the Uncle Tom. The fifth is the Savage. And then we have like a little interlude in there because we didn't add this to the women. But we're going to also discuss the stereotype of Black people eating watermelon and fried chicken, just because that goes historically into what we're talking about. The next one is drug addicts, dealers, or the thug. We also have the magical Negro and, of course, the athlete.
Oh, the athlete.
Where do y'all want to start?
Let's start with the Mandingo and the Buck.
Well, that kind of goes back to a little bit earlier of that, you're strong and you have muscles and working outside in fields all day long.
Right.
Just
Right.
labor.
Yeah.
And the sun.
Okay. Just glisten all over your body.
Yeah, exactly.
But, that came from that idea that Black men inherently have this different structure that's more capable of handling hard work.
Yeah.
That their muscle structure is designed for them to lift heavy, work long hours, and just essentially become a workhorse.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if anybody has ever worked out or had a trainer, if you don't use your muscles, you're going to be struggling in the gym.
Yes.
So it's a lot of thought processes that don't really make any sense put onto these stereotypes. So just so we all have a heads up about that. With the Mandingo portion of that is the African slave that was over-sexualized, thought to have huge genitalia and things of that nature. And then the buck had a tendency, like Dr. Strickland was talking about, to be the workhorse. But also the reason why that phrase, the buck, is so important is because there's this phrase called buck breaking.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand why the African American community has such a huge homophobic response to the LGBTQ community. And it's because buck breaking was where white slave owners would assault the slave and try to break them, essentially, and get them to be subservient and obedient. And a lot of times it wasn't just the Black women being forced. We're trying to be politically correct here, people. The Black women being forced, it was also the Black men.
Yeah. And the thing is, when you discuss things like that, Dr. Wall, that has to be the most, I'm trying to think of a politically correct word without, and I don't want to curse. That has to be the most emasculating.
Yeah. Degrading.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Degrading feeling for a man. Now, I'm not trying to minimize.
Ladies, we had our week last week.
Exactly. But men, that they don't have they have an Audi. They supposed to.
Wait a minute.
What is wrong with you?
I'm serious.
Only you.
They're not supposed to be inserted. We are. And that has to be the worst experience, especially if it's not by choice.
Yeah. I don't know.
How do you pick up from there?
It just pisses me off. I know that we trying to watch how explicit we are, but it infuriates me.
Yeah.
Because you got to think, this is not, your stereotypical situation like this, where it's just, okay, this group of people and blah, blah, blah. Like the whole plantation knows this is going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your significant other, if you were even on the same plantation, your children, everybody on the field, everybody in the house, the slave owner's family, like this is horrible.
Yeah.
And you can only imagine this was not a gentle situation.
Oh God, no.
I mean, in every sense of the word, forcible.
Yeah.
You know, there was no, well, it wasn't courtship. I mean, that's the thing.
No.
Right.
You know, it was spirit breaking
Yeah.
in every essence of the word.
To diminish everything about whoever that individual was.
And that's one of the reasons why when I have couples in my session, and I hear the woman, you know, talking and emasculating him and, you know, things like that, I have to remind the wives of those marriages, your husband needs his ego stroked too. Just because he's a man and we try and pretend like they don't have emotions and feelings and they don't need compliments and things like that, that's not true.
No, they not supposed to only be strong too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to get off of that one because my blood pressure going up. I'm feeling some type of way. The next one is the Sambo. And that typically would be the slave that was happy and simple-minded, very docile. It is the slave that was typically called like the plantation darky.
Ooh.
How do you get into
now that one
one?
that one gets my blood pressure up. So if anything that about me, Dr. Jones and Dr. Wall both know that I have a huge thing about colorism.
Yeah.
So just even hearing that word right now, like I can feel my face getting flushed right now. Because it's something that I'm very passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And just to know that was an idea held by people it's really hard to kind of wrap your mind around in modern day times, just knowing how you experience the people in your life now.
Yeah.
That you could be viewed as a simple-minded, just buffoon.
Yeah. For no reason.
Yeah.
Just because they're happy and like to sing around the, you know, plantation or, you know, the thing is they had to do something to keep their spirits up.
Yeah.
To not go crazy.
You know, a lot of times I think about, and I don't know if this is true because obviously I wasn't alive back then. I wonder if the Sambo was not a place of neutrality for the slave to exist. Not doing too much, not doing too little. I'm following through with what you feel like I need to do. Of course, there's a negative to this character, you know.
Yeah,
but it makes me wonder like where their mind had to be in order to be this person. You know, of course these are all stereotypes, but there is always a little truth somewhere in there.
Well, it kind of is a throwback to our episode on stress. So you try to have, you know, good times even in stressful times.
Yeah.
So I have to have some stress so that I don't go crazy.
Yeah.
You know, for whatever that word actually means, but so that I don't lash out and, you know, hurt everybody here.
I will wonder how, you know, if that is equivalent to how, even though I know it's not balanced, but equivalent to how we are now. Like if we're on a job and we don't like it, we'll try to stick with it until we just can't anymore. And while we're sticking with it, we're trying to stay as positive as we can because that's all we can do.
Yeah.
But the difference is now we can quit.
True.
Quickly.
Them walking papers.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Ooh. Well, the next one, and this is one that we actually didn't know about, or we didn't know about this name. It is the Jim Crow. The other name that it's typically known by is the buffoon. And that is technically the northern counterpart of the Sambo, and it's the clown dancing around, shucking and jiving, that type of energy. It's the fool of the Black stereotypes.
And I think a lot of that still exists today when you see, in media like slapstick comedy or certain types. Now, I love the Wayans. So this is no Wayans negativity, slander is being done here. But when you think about their type of comedy in some of their movies, like Scary Movie or what's the one with the ghost? I can't remember the name of that one, but it's
Scream. Is it Scream?
No, it's not Scream. They did another parody one. Marlon Wayans did a parody one by himself.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
And I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's very much that kind of over the top Black stereotype kind of, I'm going to do anything that I can to get a laugh out of you.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
I also wonder if it's something similar to the Sandman from the Apollo.
Yes, it is. Yes. That comes from that. And for those that don't know, the Jim Crow was initiated from the first minstrel shows that used to come out, and that's where the white actor, if that's what you want to call them, would dress themselves up in black paint. Well, it wasn't paint back then; it was black cork. But that's how it initiated, and it was just an overgeneralization of certain characteristics that they had saw from us doing, or I mean, like we talked about last time, how are you going to generalize the fact that we want to be happy and have a good time and things of that nature, and then you turn it into a caricature of who we actually are? That's exactly what the minstrel shows did.
Yeah.
Yeah. It puts me in the mind of the idea that there's that old saying that misery loves company. But it's kind of like, well, because I'm not satisfied with where my life is, and if you try to be happy or do better, then I have to find some way of tearing that down, to essentially make myself feel comfortable.
Feel good. It reminds me, I can't remember if it's Nina Simone or not, but it reminds me of a quote that she has, and I'm going to mess it up. But the gist is that white people's happiness cannot be found within black people's misery. Now, I don't know if that's her. It could have been another her, but y'all look it up.
But it's true,
but
though.
It's true. Yes.
Yeah.
Man,
it is.
That's a word.
But a part of that, too, I believe, and although it's decades of struggle, we have to stop letting them pretend like they can, too.
Yeah.
I think it's up to us now to create the narrative of who we are now. And but in order to do that, we have to stop living. I know this is on Solutions. Sorry, but I'm saying this one now. We have to stop living like those narratives are true, are still true. We have to begin to teach our children something different, and we have to be different.
Yeah. You have to get rid of the victim mentality, slave mentality. And that's going to be a huge undertaking, because that's a lot of hundreds of years to unpack and heal from. And it's on both sides. I think people forget that. Like, black people need to heal from slavery and the craziness, and white people need to heal from the slavery and craziness. And not in the same way, but you have to change. And change is hard. And everybody's not going to want to do the right thing on either side.
And I think black people are going to have to get past the fact that we are not going to get an apology or something that's going to ease what happened. We're going to have to heal without that.
Yeah. And I don't really know what the apology would do anyway, because the people that did it the people that started it are dead.
Right.
Phrase that.
Yeah. I think one thing that kind of complicates some of what you guys are talking about is, I was talking about this with someone earlier this week, and one of the struggles he's been having is some of the race relations at his job and how he has wanted to change some of the circumstances in his life. And he grew up in the hood. And, you know, he's gone to college and done better for himself, but he's still struggling with dealing with some of his white, you know, coworkers.
Gotcha.
And, you know, he was saying that his friends don't treat him the same and that, you know, they say you changed and all that stuff. And one of the things I was talking with him about is for American society, one of the things you have to understand is the more successful you get, the closer to whiteness you have to become. Yeah. It's just kind of the way our society is set up, unfortunately, which I think complicates some of the things that you guys are talking about.
It definitely does. You know? Kind of back to what we were saying last time, and we didn't really go into full depth about it, is how when we go on job interviews as Black women, typically they want our hair to be straight because that is a European standard of beauty. However, Black people, our hair don't come out our scalp like that. I don't know if y'all know that. Right. It come out in some type of wave or curl typically because of the way the hair follicle is set up, in case y'all want to research that. But it's hard. You know, and I think that's one reason why we see such a growing number of Black people having ownership in business. Not that we haven't done that in the past, but you know, this is one of them seasons where our stuff is not getting burned down and bombed and all that kind of stuff. We get to keep it, is because we get to be ourselves in this setting now.
Yeah. And I do believe that there is definitely some truth to the more professional or the closer to a career you get, the more white we have to be. And that's so unfortunate. Which is why I do agree with you. It's going to be difficult for us to get far removed from that mentality. Yeah. Because we have to pretend to be something or someone that we're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's why we got to get into more positions of power in the company so that people in general can just be whoever it is they are.
Yeah, true.
So
absolutely.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's certain tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's ANCHOR.FM.
Well, the next trope is the Uncle Tom, aka the sellout, and also in further history was considered the house Negro.
Every time I think of Uncle Tom, the first thing that comes to mind for me is Boondocks. I don't know why. I think about Uncle Ruckus. And for those people out there that know what the show The Boondocks by Aaron McGruder, it's a I guess cartoon that comes on, or I don't know if it's on the air anymore. But it's about these very militant one young boy that's very militant, and then another young boy that's on the very opposite end of that spectrum. And then they have two characters that would kind of embody the idea of the Uncle Tom. Mm-hmm. One is literally named Tom.
On purpose.
And then you have Uncle Ruckus.
Yeah. The definition that we found was that an Uncle Tom tends to be submissive, obedient, and has a constant desire to have white approval. And the movie that always stands out in my head now that I've watched it years later is Django and Samuel L. Jackson's character. Because he was the person running the slaves and everything and dictating how things should go and helping the slave owner out. So he's the person that always pops up in my head now.
Because it's so weird that he would play a role like that, because he's seemed to be so different than that.
But he still was himself, ironically. He was still crazy. He was. I was like, okay.
Really?
I'm watching you, Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, and it's about dichotomy. while he was still the Uncle Tom, he was like in an aggressive way though.
Yeah.
Which the slave owner was very like, okay, like, all right, we'll do that. But he still was kind of placating to what his needs and wants were. I mean, it was definitely an interesting watch to see how that could be played out in a real setting. You know, if you have a dominant personality, yet you understand the role that you have to take for survival, that how those two things can kind of come together.
Wow. That's interesting you say that, because it sounds like, it doesn't seem like dominant personality and dialing it back match.
It's like,
it depends on who it's to.
Yeah.
I mean, because one, he wasn't stupid.
So he's very smart.
He understood. You know, there's only so far that I can push you, and I have to have a little bit of humor in there, you know, to make it palpable for you, and so you can digest it. But I'm not going to go too far.
Right.
Because if I go too far, then essentially you'll, air quote, put me back in my place.
Yeah. And I think something that went with him that helped him in his situation was that he was older.
Yeah.
He wasn't like a young Uncle Tom. And typically in history, what we've seen is that type of person would probably be more so over the field slaves versus having been in the house like Samuel L. Jackson's character was, because he was running everything though.
Yeah.
Like from the house,
he was the foreman
to the edge of the property. So that was unusual to see it like that. I hadn't really ever seen that before. But the Uncle Tom is something that is still to this day we talk about and we call people.
We do.
Coons. I mean, that if we're going to be
Throw
forward about that, that's kind of the more colloquial term now is we just call people that engage in that type of behavior coons.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like, what else can you say about that? And there's nothing else to say because we still do that.
Yeah. And I'll say you see it in every level. It's not just people who haven't like gone to school or whatever other thing you want to compare things to. You see that in corporate America between Black people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's you typically have the token Black person, and then if someone else comes in, they are the person who sets the homeostasis for all other Black people.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's I think there's a Key and Peele sketch that's out there about that, where another Black person comes and then they have like this telepathy with each other.
Yeah.
And they can read each other's minds by just looking at each other. If we had video, you could see the look that I'm giving Dr. Wall. Because
I'm picking up what you're throwing at.
Right. That it's all that there's a commonality in our experiences for the most part. And like, yeah, okay. So we good? All right, we good. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
The next one is the savage. And the only reason why the savage is not first is that the phrase for Black people came later. And it came once we started to get more rights and get freedom and different things like this. This particular trope, I want to say, was like the early 1900s, 1920s area. So that's why we placed it here. But typically it was because with our freedom, it became a threat to society and we needed to be controlled or needed to be tamed. So that's kind of where that comes from.
Kind of increase lynchings, things like that. When the savage that comes to mind for me is Emmett Till. Yeah. Like that's the first name that is brought up internally for me because it was an untruth.
Yeah. And that was 55.
Yes.
That wasn't that long ago.
No.
Right.
I mean,
my mama wasn't even born yet. So
neither one of my parents were born yet.
Yeah.
So it's just, when you think about it, it's such a short time ago But that's like the first thing that kind of comes to mind for me is, you're just out here prowling the streets looking for something to take over. You're looking to, cause all kind of ruckus. You're unhinged. You have no control over your emotions. You have no control over your behavior. So we have to, again, set you straight.
But yeah, we not the ones out here
being savage
and
right,
doing all this extra stuff every time we get angry. That's not what goes on. Something we were talking about right before we started was how scientists in the medical world had a huge part in us becoming savages, and how they analyzed our bodies, our Black bodies, to indicate that we were savages. So like, because we had short Black hair, because we had wider noses, or because our lips were a certain size, or our brain was heavier than a Caucasian brain. Those are some of the reasons why they proved that we were savages.
Again, trying to tell us that we weren't or aren't good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pseudoscience is a funny thing. As Trump would say, like fake news, like that was like the OG of fake news.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just created this thing and said, it's true. And then everyone just kind of glommed onto it and said, oh, well, this person that went to this school in Oxford said that the Negroid brain is heavier than the Caucasoid brain. So
you went back to the 80s on that one. Okay. I think an example of that in current times is, check out what the medical examiner says are people's cause of death in police brutality.
Wow.
Death by suicide.
Yeah. I was like, no, I don't really think that's how that happened.
Right.
But okay.
If you put your knee on somebody's neck,
yeah,
and they can't breathe,
that's what ends up happening. And that's why a lot of families end up getting a second examiner to make sure that what they say happened is what actually happened. But
Absolutely.
That's another way that the medical and the scientists are still perpetuating that information in today's times.
Mm-hmm.
So always get second opinions.
Always. What do y'all feel the impact of the savage has done to the Black men?
I think it kind of has perpetuated that whole idea of strong.
Okay.
I think in some ways it has morphed over time into overprotective, super strong, that kind of mindset. I don't know if it's still savage in the traditional sense of that word, or what it meant for like Native Americans. But I do think that for some, I'm not going to of course say all, but for some Black men, how we talked about last week, what Black women use the strong Black woman as an answer to the angry Black woman.
Yeah.
I think they've kind of taken on savage and tried to twist that different definition to their benefit, even though
be strong Black men.
Mm-hmm.
Got you.
I think it's encouraged them to become individualistic, to only focus on them and or their immediate family.
Got you.
I truly, because I've been saying for some time now that the United States is very individualistic.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely perpetuates their idea of being, see, I told y'all, no, I gotta get mine before you get yours.
And I'm thinking, I've heard people say this in my personal life, and I've seen this on social media. Like, I go hard for mine, and it's just like, okay, but what do you mean by that? How is that playing out in your everyday life when you say you go hard for yours? So I think that's some of the kind of, like you saying, individualistic idea of like, this my family.
Yes.
Or these my kids, or that's my wife.
Which I think women are like this too, but which is why men have a difficult time with ending relationships that are unhealthy for them when they have children with some men, with women, because they don't want another man raising their children.
Mm-hmm.
I can attest to that. Yeah. I think that's going to be one that Black men ultimately have to change the narrative on.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a while.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, a lot of these tropes are still in existence in some type of way, even to this day. So
It's just seen differently.
yeah,
Because it's outwardly being portrayed differently.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Another one of the tropes that we wanted to talk about is watermelon and fried chicken. And a lot of the things that we're discussing came from a movie called Birth of a Nation, not the new one, the one in the 1915s. And it depicted a lot of negative stereotypes about Black people. And people just ran with it because if it was on TV or in the movie theaters, it had to be real. But a lot of people don't know the reason why watermelon is attached to Black people is because once we were actually given a piece of freedom, we decided to become watermelon farmers, a lot of us. And with that, we started making our own money, getting property, of course, because you got to farm the land, and just making something out of ourselves out of a horrible situation. And that was threatening to former slave owners or other white people because they were seeing us do something that they could have done, but they hadn't. And so what ended up happening is that a lot of those farms were ransacked, burned to the ground, and no longer in existence. You can still go in our history and see these flyers with these caricatures of Black people with these huge mouths and one or two teeth eating watermelon.
Pickaninnies.
Yeah, pickaninnies. But that's where that comes from. It actually was a healthy thing until it was misconstrued.
Again.
And I hate watermelon, for the record.
I mean, I love it. It's my favorite fruit, you know.
I like it too.
And then fried chicken, that's another play off of The Birth of a Nation, where there was this loud, obnoxious Black man eating fried chicken in a legislative hall. I think that's what it was. I can't remember exactly because I haven't seen the original one in a very long time, but I want to say that's what it was. And so they associate these things for all Black people. And I remember my grandparents are originally from Franklin, Tennessee. And if anybody knows anything about Franklin, you know what type of people live in Franklin. And my grandfather would not allow us to eat fried chicken, eat watermelon, or drink red Kool-Aid outside of the house. And if we, because you know,
that's all the stereotypes almost wrapped up into one.
Yeah,
Right.
he was like, you can eat that in the house, or you can go outside in the backyard and eat, because you know watermelon can be, you know, messy. But he was like, no, I've never in my lifetime saw my grandfather drink any red Kool-Aid. Never. He never ate watermelon off the rind. Like, he was so particular about how he wanted things to be.
It's a different lifestyle and a different that's a different time in life, but even today, because sometimes you can still even feel that, that you don't feel it as intensely as maybe as he did, but you can still be like, I don't know how this look.
Yeah, because it's weird now growing up in a home like I grew up in. And my grandfather also had a military background, but growing up and you go to a restaurant now, well, not in COVID, but when we out of COVID, and people are eating with their hands, like that was, that wasn't something that we could have done back in the day. And even now I'd be like, okay, can I really eat with my hands? Like, I'm checking to make sure it's okay.
Yeah.
Or if somebody be like, oh, you tearing up that chicken. Like the first thing in your mind, you want to like put it down. Because you'd be like, wait, hold on.
And you prefer, well, I know you don't eat watermelon, but I prefer for my watermelon to already be cut off and sliced so that I don't have to even deal with all of that.
On my face.
See, and look at that. And we are, this many years away from slavery, this many years away from minstrel shows, this many years away from Jim Crow era. And again, that still is lingering and left over that in 2020 you would still be thinking, you know what, let me cut this watermelon up into cubes and eat it with my fork.
Yeah.
Or, pick up the pieces. Or, you know what, let me eat this chicken at the house.
Yeah.
Or let me eat, one bite and then chew, and then one bite and then chew.
Or it's boneless. Because I'm
boneless.
notorious for a chicken strip. Like, like it ain't gonna have nothing in it. But
And
you have to be conscious of all that stuff because we're not.
Oh yeah, and I'm thinking like, don't be out in public like sucking on a bone or something like that.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Like
God.
you
You
really
got knocked under the table by your mama or daddy.
okay.
Don't
Like,
do
what
that.
you out here doing, making us look bad? And speaking of that, that's one thing that we haven't talked about, even though this isn't specific to Black men, is that if one of us messes up, it is a representation of all Black people.
Yeah.
That we are essentially speaking, while in reality we know that one Black person cannot actually speak for all Black people, but when we are viewed from the outside, if one Black person does something, then that means we all did something.
Yeah. Which I'm so thankful, because if everybody thought I was like Kanye West, I'd be so upset.
Yeah. Yeah, he got some things going on.
He's struggling this week. He's struggling.
Is, definitely.
Well, let's move on because we don't need to stay on that man too long either.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Clearly. Black mental health on Black men. That's the topic right there.
Yes.
The next one is kind of a big category, but it's the drug addict, drug dealer, or the thug.
I think this one got perpetuated more through the media. I think this one was definitely a policy thing, and I think it was a media thing. Policy, of course, I mean, again, do your Googles, people. So you can you can look at all into the drug wars and
1980s, 1990s.
Yes. So you can look into all of that. But I think some of that also got perpetuated through, rightfully so, through movies like New Jack City, Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society.
Yeah.
They told some very wonderful stories, but I think it kind of perpetuated that drug dealer.
That's the
kinda
lifestyle.
Right.
And once it was put before our eyes, then it was connected. Like it always has been. It's connected. But if statistically, go to a reputable website and look at the statistics on Black drug addicts and white drug addicts. And although the percentage looks higher for Black people, you have to look at the population that they used, how many people was in that population to get that percentage.
Yeah.
And the types of drugs that we use.
They two totally different things.
Yeah. I think that was another thing. So, and this can become an income thing as well. Whereas crack cocaine was much more prevalent in Black neighborhoods.
And it's easier to make.
It's easier to make. It's cheaper. Versus powder cocaine, which was used in, white neighborhoods or upper echelon areas. So I think that's another thing that people don't think about with the drug dealer and there's so many layers to it.
Yeah. And I think also we have to make sure we talk about the fact that marijuana up until more recently was one of those drugs.
Yes.
Even in some states, it still is one of those drugs because the whole United States has not made that a national thing.
Right.
But that's one of the things that you see more Black people in jail for, more Black people using. But if you go over to the opioid side, the pill popping side,
and the heroin,
that you're going to see more of that when you look at Caucasian individuals.
Yeah. And I think some of the drug dealer lifestyle and kind of that thug has been glamorized.
Yeah.
This is another one I think we've kind of taken that one and ran with it. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a Scarface poster up somewhere, or The Godfather, so I think that gangster lifestyle, that
power,
quick money.
Quick money,
'Cause think of
power,
the-
all of that.
Speaking of power, the show,
Oh, yeah.
everybody loves that show because of
Mhm.
Ghost and all the people that's on the show, but it's romanticized.
Yeah.
Like, that's a hard life to live. Anybody that has grew up in a community that was impoverished or riddled with, different drugs, they know that that wasn't an easy life.
Mhm.
Yeah, typically if you live in it, you like, okay, some people are like, let me get with a drug dealer or let me run drugs because I'm going to have money and I'm going to be able to provide. But that shouldn't be like your first thing that you go towards.
Well, I think the mentality of that is that I have, from the way society describes me, I have no way to make money a different way, to make a lot of money at one time in a different way. So therefore, I have to do what I need to do, look like I need to, the way I need to look in order for me to be able to have the power, the money, and the respect.
Yeah. And one thing I think is interesting, so a branch off of the drug dealer thug type is the like trying to get out of the hood.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to get out of the hood was the athlete.
Yeah.
Which I think spurred on a different stereotype or kind of trope for Black men.
Yeah.
Which is I think is a throwback to the buck.
It is.
You
Definitely is.
That our bodies, again, are just made differently. So if I want to get out of the hood, I'm going to use my body as a method for doing so.
Exactly.
And one of the most, acceptable ways of doing that is athletics.
Play ball,
Mm-hmm.
play football. And it's also a correlation with Black men that the taller they are, the more muscular they are, the more scary they seem to be. And that is still played out even with the athletes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely I think with the athletes, because I have a lot of athletes in my family, they also attract a certain type of person.
They do.
And it then perpetuates the other cycles, the sexualized.
I ain't saying she
cycle.
a gold digger, but she ain't messing with no.
Broke.
But that is exactly what pops up. Like, if you look at that, because it follows along the same lines of celebrity, fame and things like that. It is interesting to see, because this man plays really good with balls.
Wow.
Pun intended.
I was like,
That makes him more desirable.
yeah.
But there also are people who struggle with knowing how to run the business of being an athlete, or knowing how to be intelligent and different things like that. And it continues to keep us in a inferior state.
That's why I like to see the Shaquille O'Neals and the Michael Jordans, who although they were great athletes, they didn't limit themselves to their gift as an athlete. They were able to show that you can do something else as well. Not even if you do decide to become an athlete, you still have to set yourself up for success in the future. So that can't be your only money maker.
Yeah. Because you're not going to have them knees forever.
Right.
What the average age for any ball player, whether that's football or basketball, because those tend to be the two sports that we generally gravitate towards, is 40.
If that.
Yeah, late 30s.
Yeah.
But by 40, I mean, the body is really starting to break down from all the injuries and just running. The amount of joint pressure that comes from running and falling and, I mean, all kinds of things.
Yeah, I think the only sport that's significantly older than that is baseball. And that's just a different set of maneuvering, you know. And I think our final one, even though we kind of went out of order, is the magical Negro. And I think that's a good one to end on because it's a lighter note. I know Dr. Jones was saying something specific about the magical Negro, about being heroes in a lot of movies and different things like that.
I forgot. I was shaking my head. No, because I forgot. Yes. But so that's the in the black person in a movie where he's the one who protects the main character, probably the white character, and he's usually the only black person in the movie or the show or whatever. So yeah,
I think examples of that you can find are like The Green Mile is a good one, where you have a magical Negro.
Literally.
Yes. Driving Miss Daisy is another one where he just kind of was there. Fried Green Tomatoes is another one where he kind of just protected. Oh, I cannot remember the main character girl's name, but he kind of protected her from all sorts of shenanigans. I think those are some examples if you were kind of looking for a visual of like, okay, so what is the magical, Negro?
Yeah. And the magical Negro, I guess, is kind of equivalent to the awkward black girl in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Or the sassy sidekick for women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's true.
One thing, so, to kind of end out this session, one thing I'm interested in is hopefully to get some feedback from you guys on what your experiences have been, in particular, of course, from Black men, and just living your everyday life. Have you had to face any of these particular tropes? How did they show themselves? How'd you deal with them? Just kind of educating us women on some of your experiences, since this is not something that we're going to go through on a daily. We may be able to observe what you experience, but there's nothing like getting firsthand knowledge, like Dr. Wall was saying earlier that she obtained from one of her friends. I think it's good to have these stories and anecdotes so that we know how to better be an ally to you.
In order for you to be able to, comment or give us some feedback, go on our Facebook page and just kind of give us some information, and hopefully you won't mind us sharing it on the podcast, because we do want to have dialogue with you all and answer questions. Next week, we're going to dissect a movie, The Diary of a Mad Black Woman.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a series that we're going to do about once a month. And the idea is to do it on the fourth Wednesday of each month. Mm-hmm. And we're going to title this segment Movie Mental Breakdown, where we take a movie that is about a specific topic and we look at it from a mental health standpoint. So that will include kind of how the character, how their story arc is developed, what they go through, solutions, what any potential diagnoses that may have been showcased in those movies, how is that sensationalized versus the reality of those things. So we're just going to kind of break it down from a mental health standpoint.
So for the people that are following us, if you want to go ahead and watch that movie, or if you remember the movie and you already know some questions that you have about the movie, just put it on our Facebook page and we can definitely answer those questions as we're going through our discussion.
Or our Instagram. I forgot to say that. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of those good things. We don't have our streaming services set up to take any comments right now just because we're waiting on that. We don't want to be inundated with too much.
But thank you all for the support that you all have given us. We have actually received a lot of support, a lot of feedback, a lot of just listens. And so it's been wonderful just to see the support that we have from you all. So thank you.
Must be this volume control.
So, okay, interns, process your notes. Be sure to catch us next session and find us on all major platforms at The Recycled Podcast.
If you're a new intern, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share.
Thanks for listening. And remember, we are shifting and reshaping our psyche through healing conversations and connections, one discussion at a time.